White woman calls police on black teen, speechless when his mom arrives, and she's the mayor. Alan, a young black teenager, was relaxing in the afternoon sun at Oakwood Park in Atlanta, Georgia. He leaned against an oak tree, enjoying the warm breeze and waiting for his mom, Maria, the city's mayor, to pick him up. Lost in his thoughts, he didn't notice the middle-aged white woman nearby, watching him with suspicion. Her name was Linda, and as she sat on a park bench, her gaze grew more intense, her expression tight. Finally, she walked over to Alan with a confrontational look on her face. "What are you doing here?" she demanded. "This is a family park, not a place for troublemakers." Confused and a little stunned, Alan responded calmly, "Ma'am, I'm just waiting for my mom. I'm not causing any trouble." But Linda wasn't convinced. Her face turned red with irritation and she pulled out her phone. Despite Alan's quiet insistence that he was just waiting, Linda dialed 911, explaining to the dispatcher that there was a suspicious teenager in the park. Alan watched in disbelief as she reported him. His heart sank. He knew all too well how quickly these situations could turn dangerous. He prayed his mom would arrive soon and stood quietly, hoping the ordeal would end without trouble. A few moments later, the air was filled with the sound of screeching tires as two police cruisers pulled up, red and blue lights flashing. Alan's stomach tightened as he saw the officers approach. One of them asked Linda what had happened, and she exaggerated her story, claiming Alan had been loitering and causing concern for families. Alan tried to speak up, but the officers cut him off, asking him to wait. The questioning continued, and Alan grew more anxious as he noticed onlookers gathering, some even recording the incident. He tried to keep calm, but frustration and fear mixed within him. Just as things seemed to be getting worse, a black SUV pulled up to the park entrance, and out stepped Maria, his mom. The officers' faces shifted as they recognized her. After all, she was the mayor of Atlanta. She approached with a determined stride, her gaze sweeping over the scene and landing on her son, who was standing tensely nearby. "What's going on here?" Maria's voice was clear and steady, but the anger simmered beneath. Linda's face paled as she realized her mistake, her jaw dropping as she connected the dots. Maria addressed the officers, her words sharp and unwavering. "Why are my officers questioning my son for simply being in a public park?" The officers shifted uncomfortably, struggling to explain, while Linda's confidence crumbled. Maria continued, her voice cool and controlled. "Did it cross anyone's mind that this might be a case of bias? That my son deserves the same presumption of innocence as anyone else?" Silence fell over the group as everyone took in the weight of her words. Maria placed a protective hand on Alan's shoulder. "Are you okay?" she asked, her voice softening. Alan nodded, the tension finally easing. "I'm okay, Mom," he said quietly, grateful she had arrived just in time. The onlookers watched as Mayor Maria Thompson led her son away, leaving Linda and the officers to consider the consequences of their actions and the ripple effects of assumptions. Mayor Maria Thompson, her face a blend of calm and authority, turned directly to Linda. Taking a step closer, she addressed her firmly, her voice steady but unmistakably serious. "Ma'am," Maria began, her gaze piercing, "I'm not sure what you thought my son was doing to warrant calling the police, but it's clear to me there was no real reason for this. Alan was simply waiting for me here in a public park like any other person has the right to do." Linda, now visibly uncomfortable, stammered, I thought he looked suspicious. I didn't mean any harm." Maria's expression remained unchanged. "Suspicious? My son was alone, bothering no one. You made assumptions based on nothing but his appearance," she said. "You may not realize it, but calls like yours lead to young men like Alan being unfairly targeted. This is unacceptable." Linda's face flushed with embarrassment. She opened her mouth to respond, but Maria continued. "I'm warning you. Be mindful of the harm your actions can cause. Prejudice has no place in this community, and I won't tolerate seeing my son, or any other young person being treated this way." The onlookers, who had watched the scene unfold, murmured in agreement. Maria's words served as both a defense for her son and a broader call for change. her voice resonating as a reminder of the importance of fairness and understanding. As the silence settled around them, Linda's gaze dropped to the ground, her initial defiance shrinking into shame. Maria's tone softened, but her eyes remained firm, conveying a quiet strength and resilience that had defined her entire career as mayor. "Linda, I want you to think about the impact of what you did here today," Maria said, her voice low yet resolute. "Imagine if Alan were your son, standing here scared and unsure, with a crowd forming and officers approaching. How would you feel?" Linda's face tightened, the weight of Maria's words sinking in. She shifted uncomfortably, and her eyes welled up, realizing the gravity of her actions. I just thought," Linda stammered, her voice cracking. "I'm sorry, I didn't think." "It's not just about thinking, Linda," Maria replied gently. "It's about seeing people for who they are, not what you assume them to be. That's the only way we'll build a community where everyone feels safe and respected." She turned to the officers who stood watching, their expressions a mixture of guilt and respect. "And this goes for all of us," Maria added, her voice carrying a firm edge. "Every member of law enforcement, every citizen, needs to be accountable for the way we treat one another. No one should live in fear of simply existing in public spaces." The officers nodded, clearly affected by her words, and one of them spoke up. "We're sorry for any distress this caused, Mayor Thompson. We'll handle calls like this more carefully in the future." Maria gave them a measured nod before placing a reassuring hand on Alan's shoulder. He looked up at his mother, the initial fear in his eyes slowly fading, replaced by a quiet pride and gratitude. Her calm strength, her willingness to stand up for him and others like him, was something he'd always carry with him. As Maria began to lead Alan away, Linda called after her softly, "Mayor Thompson, I am truly sorry, I didn't mean to. I'll do better." Maria paused, offering her a small nod. "I hope you will, Linda. We all need to." With that, Maria and Alan walked toward the park's edge, the tension easing as the crowd dispersed, whispers of admiration following them. Alan glanced back at his mother, a newfound admiration in his own gaze. "Thanks, Mom," he murmured, his voice soft. I didn't know what to do. I was so scared." Maria wrapped her arm around his shoulder, pulling him close. "You handled it well, Alan. And remember, I'll always be here for you. We'll stand up to things like this together." In that moment, Alan realized his mother wasn't just the mayor of Atlanta. She was his champion, his protector, and the embodiment of everything he wanted to be. Together, they walked out of the park, the sun casting long shadows behind them, a reminder that while some challenges were far from over, they'd face them together, with strength, courage, and hope for a better future. As Alan and Maria reached their car, Alan was still processing everything that had happened. His mom had always told him to hold his head high and be proud of who he was, but he'd never imagined needing to lean on her strength in such a direct, public way. He looked up at her as she unlocked the car, feeling a profound mix of love, pride, and gratitude. But before they could drive away, Maria's phone rang. She glanced at the screen, her face tensing slightly. She answered, her voice calm but professional. "Yes, Chief Daniels, yes, I understand. Thank you for handling it quickly." After ending the call, Maria turned to Alan, her expression serious. "That was the police chief," she said. "He's going to require additional training for the officers to help prevent situations like this in the future. It's a step in the right direction." Alan nodded, relieved to know his mom's influence was already making a difference. "Do you think that woman, Linda, really learned something today?" he asked. Maria sighed, placing a hand on his shoulder. "I hope so. But change takes time, Alan. Today we showed her and everyone watching that they can't just make assumptions. We might not change every mind, but each small victory matters." As they drove home, Alan thought about the weight his mother carried, not just as mayor but as a leader, a role model, and a mother trying to protect him. It made him realize that he too had a responsibility to set an example, not just by being a good person, but by standing up for himself and others. Leave a comment if you enjoyed this story. It doesn't cost you anything, and you'll make me very happy. Thank you, and I look forward to your like.